It has become a spectacle that draws bird watchers and photographers every winter. Bald eagles flocking to the wildlife sanctuary at Ausable Point State Park in nearby Lake Champlain to fish. Over the past few decades, the number has grown. In 2017, New York reported a record number of 323 nesting pairs of eagles, a remarkable comeback for a bird that nearly went extinct until the pesticide DDT was banned nearly 50 years ago. But even though they have bounced back, many eagles in the wild are still threatened by another environmental poison.
And we're happy to be joined this week by Kevin Hynes, a state wildlife biologist with New York's Department of Environmental Conservation. Welcome, nice to have you.
Nice to be here, thanks.
Let's begin with the good news. The eagle population in New York is thriving.
It is.
We've seen a record number of nesting pairs this year. That's been announced, 323. What a comeback, a remarkable comeback from 30, 40 years ago when I think New York got down to just one nest at one point.
Yeah, in 1970 there was just one nest and it was unproductive. They'd try every year and they wouldn't have any chicks. 2 years later in 1972, EPA banned the use of DDT, which was instrumental in staging the comeback for the bald eagle because DDT was causing their eggshells to thin and causing nest failures across the country.
So no doubt that was the primary
That's the primary reason.
factor. And so the state started a restoration program in the mid to late 70s.
I think in 1976 they started. It was before my time. Pete and I and the Endangered Species Unit were taking eaglets from Alaska, Minnesota, I think maybe some from Wisconsin. They would take those birds and they'd put them in what they call hacking towers. And then the hope would be that they would provide food for them. They would fly off, and in 4 to 5 years when they reached sexual maturity, they would come back and nest in New York. And it worked. By 1988, when the program ended, they had 10 nesting pairs, which was the goal of the program to begin with. And it's grown almost, not quite exponentially, but it's grown quite a bit since. As you mentioned earlier, I think 2017 they announced over 300 nests, occupied nests in New York.
Exceeded expectations.
Yeah.
So no doubt it's been successful, but at the same time, with a record number of nesting pairs now, there are concerns. You are seeing a number of the eagles dying still. There's another environmental threat that they're facing.
We looked at some data from 2000 to 2015, and during that time I necropsied 336 eagles. So all the eagles that are found dead come to our lab and we do a necropsy on them to determine cause of death. Of those 336 eagles, 54% of them died of some sort of trauma. They were either hit by cars, hit by trains, killed by other eagles during territory defenses. 12% of those eagles died from lead poisoning. In the early 2000s, we'd get 1 to 4 cases a year of lead poisoning. But recently, we started to see increased numbers of lead poisoning. In 2015, we had 9 cases. In 2016, we had 9 cases. And in 2017, so far, we have 7 cases. So we're on track to probably reach 9 again and maybe even exceed it.
How do you think they're ingesting the lead?
Eagles are the consummate scavengers, right? So during the hunting months, the winter months, when their normal diet of fish may not be as readable because the lakes are frozen over, they switch over to a kind of a scavenging existence. And the way that I'm fairly certain they're getting the lead is from discarded gut piles from hunter-killed deer. So they're typically just left in the field. And then the eagles and certainly a lot of other scavengers see that and they come down and they take advantage of that food source. And it's the lead bullet fragments that is a source of lead for these eagles.
Is California one state that's looking at banning lead from ammunition?
California has banned it, I think, already in certain areas where the California condor lives. And I think some of the other states may have a ban on also where you can only use copper ammunition in those areas.
Any talk of New York looking at a similar law?
Well, It's been discussed, but we don't think that it's needed. We're hoping that an education campaign, elevating this issue, because I think most sportsmen and hunters, they just don't know about it. And if they knew that it was a risk to eagles, that they would do something, they wouldn't want to be responsible for the death of an eagle, and they certainly would want to do the right thing. I mean, hunters are the first conservationists. I mean, they started the whole conservation movement. I mean, they're all, conscientious people, and they want to do the right thing for the environment. They don't want to ruin the resource for themselves, and they don't want to do harm to eagles. So if they knew that it was a problem, they could take fairly simple steps to eliminate a problem. I mean, this is an environmental problem that is so easy to fix, whereas some of them are so difficult, like we were talking about the forest pests earlier. Yeah. This is simply a matter of making it so that the gut pile isn't available to eagles, either by covering it with sticks and brush, or in an area where the eagles aren't going to see it, because they're primarily a sight hunter. So if they don't see it, they're not going to know about it. Burying it under snow isn't going to work, by the way, because that'll melt and they'll just get it a couple months later. Or switching to non-lead ammunition, which is about the same cost, potentially a little bit slightly more expensive than lead, but ballistically the same, in some cases superior, and it doesn't leave any lead fragments in the carcass, and you could leave the gut pile for the animals to eat with a clear conscience.
So that's an easy choice. There is alternative ammunition available that they can use.
Yeah, it's available in most calibers. It's not super easy to get right now. You can't walk into Walmart and get it for most calibers. You may have to do some looking and some work to get it. But it's well worth it as far as the risk to eagles are concerned. And as more people ask for it, the demand will rise, and it'll become more readily available, and the price will come down as well.
Just this week we had a story about the increase in ticks that we're seeing. Obviously concern for humans about Lyme disease, but what about wildlife?
Well, the tick we're concerned the most with currently in the Adirondacks, at least my lab is concerned with, would be the winter tick on moose. And it's only been in the past 5 or 6 years when we've actually seen our first cases of winter tick. It's a big problem for moose in northern New England. It's a one-host tick. So once it gets on the moose, it does its entire life cycle on that one animal, and then it drops off. So they get on in the fall, and when the moose is walking by, and they have the ability to just multiply on the moose, and each one of them is taking a blood meal. And on smaller moose, like a calf, they can literally exsanguinate the moose over the course of the winter, and they don't survive. We haven't seen really bad cases in New York yet. We've just noticed a dozen or so ticks on some of the moose we've been seeing. So it's not a big problem for us yet, but that's certainly something that's on the horizon that's going to make it tough potentially for moose to survive the winter.
We followed along with researchers this summer who are using dogs to sniff out moose scat to try to see how the population is doing. Other states along the northern border are seeing signs of the moose exiting and heading north. They believe climate change, the warming temperatures, are driving them further north. Are we seeing signs of that in New York and the Adirondacks?
Researchers at Cornell, in conjunction with DEC, are studying that to see if that may be the case. We don't really have a great handle on how many moose we have in New York. So they've collared a number of moose every year, and they're studying moose now to see what the population is and to determine if it's rising or falling or staying kind of stable. We are at the extreme southern edge of the range, so certainly if climate change progresses as all indications are that it will, moose will go north along the temperature gradient. It's an animal that's just not made for warm temperatures. I mean, they just slow right down. When it's warm out, they overheat. It's an animal that needs cold winters and not so hot summers.
So really your job is to take wildlife and figure out what's impacting them, what's in many cases killing them.
Yeah, my job is fascinating. Every animal that comes in is like a little mystery, and I get to determine how it died and why it died, what diseases it may or may not have. And it's a very, very interesting job. I'm very fortunate.
And really, you're in the forefront of being able to identify problems like lead poisoning.
That's the idea. So the Wildlife Health Unit, which I'm a part of, we work in conjunction with the Wildlife Health Program at Cornell University. So we work as a team, and we are probably one of the better programs in the country for detecting diseases early and seeing what's going on with the state's wildlife and hopefully keeping them healthy.
One of the favorite debates up here in the Adirondacks year after year is mountain lions. Are there mountain lions in the Adirondacks? Of course, there was the case of the mountain lion who passed through the Adirondacks, left a track in Warrensburg, I believe, and then unfortunately was hit and struck and killed by a car in Connecticut. And it turns out that, were you folks through DNA testing able to confirm that that mountain lion had indeed, from the Dakotas, passed through the Adirondack Park on its way to Connecticut?
Eventually we were. Initially, when we first got that report, they sent me some photographs of the track, the one you're talking about, and we get photographs like that not infrequently from people that say they've seen mountain lions, but we had a fairly credible source in this case. It was a retired conservation officer at his house, and his wife had actually seen the cat the night before. It triggered a motion light in their backyard. So he and ECO Gerain the next day backtracked it through the snow, and they found an area where it bedded down, and they were able to collect some hairs, and they sent the hairs down to us along with the photos. So I sent some hairs to a mountain lion researcher who did genetic work that we'd worked with in the past, and it's an academic lab, and they weren't in a hurry to do it, so it was kind of on the back burner. And then when the one got hit in Connecticut, then they said, oh. So I contacted the folks that did the DNA lab on that, and I still had some hairs in reserve, and I sent them out to the U.S. Forest Service lab, and they were able to tell that it was the same cat. So that is a new record for dispersal of carnivore. And that record's probably going to stand for a while.
That surprised even you that cat came that far.
If you told me, I would have said that's pretty unlikely. I wouldn't have believed it. Yeah. So as far as mountain lions being in New York, here you've got this one cat that went from North Dakota through Wisconsin up and down through New York, and it was detected in most of those states. One cat. They've got scat, they've got hairs, we got tracks, we got hairs, and then they got the actual cat in Connecticut.
Right.
If we had any number of mountain lions in New York, we would know about it. They're fairly conspicuous. They would leave tracks. You would see kill sites, and we investigate a lot of these claims. We investigate them, and we take it seriously. So we look at deer carcasses that someone thinks was killed by a mountain lion, and we'll do DNA work on them. And in most cases, it's bobcats that are killing them, so that'll look similar, or coyotes.
Yeah.
We haven't found any real evidence yet. So if there were mountain lions in New York, we would know about it. If they were here, we'd see them.
Kevin Hynes, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.